Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:15, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our panel today. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the session, Niche Publishers, Leading Innovation in Transformative Agreements. I am going to place the conference code of conduct up here as a reminder for everyone as we participate in today's panel session together. And you're welcome to use the QR code to read the full text if you'd like to learn more. My name is Annie Rao, and I'm the Head of Collections and Research Services at Syracuse University. And in a few minutes, we're going to introduce the rest of the panel as well. But just for a little bit of context of what we're doing up here today. So I am from a private research institution founded in 1870. We're made up of 75% undergraduate students and 25% graduate students. And through our libraries, we support open access publishing through many forms, of which many of them we're going to talk about today. And we also produce our own digital archives and digital collections in our library, which is growing rapidly. And just for context, I did want to make sure to disclose that I'm a longtime member of the PCG and Genta Library Council, which is how I've met my fine co-panelists that are up here with me today. So we're going to go through and introduce the rest of the group as well. And while they're introducing themselves, they're also going to be sure to share with you why they consider their organizations a niche organization.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Hi, I'm David Sarsfield. I'm the Head of Library Sales at British Online Archives. We're a small independent publisher based in the north of England. British Online Archives builds on a publishing tradition stretching all the way back to 1956 through our parent company, Microform Imaging Limited. So British Online Archives, we currently have 125 primary source collections that are geared towards teaching and research within the humanities and social sciences. We work with a number of archival partners. As you can tell by the title of our platform, they are predominantly British-based, most notably the UK National Archives and the British Library, but also many more besides that. And the way that we like to pitch ourselves to people is that whilst we do source our primary source content predominantly from British-based archives, given Britain's historical relationship with the world, we very much see our records as world history, but through a distinctly British lens. And I suppose, sorry, did you want me to start with the whole niche, makes us niche? Yeah, no problem. So I think the thing that makes us niche is that, as I said before, we are a small to medium-sized organisation. Can sometimes be challenges with that, but I think there's a lot of things that stand out that can be really positive. So, say for example, we have very little or no overarching bureaucracy which dictates what we can and can't do. That allows us to think more nimbly and respond very quickly, and also allows us to build up a more personalised approach with our institutional customers as well. So yeah, I suppose that's probably the main thing I would say.
I'm Andrea Lopez. I'm the Director of Sales at N Reviews. N Reviews are our initial product was the N Reviews, and that's what I'm going to talk most about today. But as you know, we also own the Charleston Conference and publish 2 magazines. But we were founded by a scientist in 1932, and I think what makes us niche is we're a nonprofit. That's not what makes us niche, but we're a nonprofit that's not associated with the university, and we're not associated with the society. And there's not a lot of independent nonprofits out there. I think what also makes us niche is our journals. Although we're not niche in that we publish in a specific subject, all of our journals are long form invited reviews. So we don't do any primary research and we don't take any submissions. So that always makes it interesting in a conference when people are talking about submissions and peer review. That's not really part of our process. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Graham Anderson. I'm the head of sales and marketing at the Royal Society. We have 10 journals, 2 of them are gold open access and 8 are hybrid. Probably what makes us niche is we are the oldest scientific publisher in the world. Next year, we'll be 360 years old. So I think that makes us a little bit different because we've been here a long time and seen many changes in that time.
Thank you all for those great introductions and for giving us some context as we move into our questions. So the way that this is going to work is we have a few questions that we're going to start with that we've thought about ahead of time with our panel here. I'm going to ask some questions. My colleagues are going to answer them. But as we're beginning to answer those questions, if there's anything that you'd like us to share more about, or if you have any questions that we've not addressed during the set of questions that we're starting with, please be jotting those down, because we will have plenty of time for you to ask us questions after we go through these first few. So we're going to start this afternoon with talking a little bit more about your institution or company and its organization. So how does the way in which your institution or company is organized benefit the library community and the end users of your resources?
Sure, I'll go first. Well, at N Reviews, as I said, we're a nonprofit. So we make decisions that are based on our mission, which is to integrate integrate knowledge for the progress of science and the benefit of society. And the benefit of society is a new part of our mission, but I think it's important in answering this question. And we are also a smaller company, and we don't have a lot of layers of management. So we have our board of directors, which is made up mostly of scientists, but we've brought some business people in. We have our management team, which of 8 of us are the directors of our departments. We have a handful of supervisors, and then we have our staff. So with a small company like that, we can make decisions very quickly. And we have a small sales team. They're talking to the library customers. They don't have to go through layers of management to make a change that libraries might be asking for. And we can collaborate really easily within the company. And I think that's the way we're organized makes that very easy. And then also in things like going to open access, our original plan was to open our journals over a 10-year period. And we saw how was that fair from our editorial side? How can they explain to one of the editorial teams their journal might not become open for another 10 years? So we were very quickly able to pivot and make that change. And I think at a company of our size, that really helps us make those quick decisions. And it keeps us closer to the customer when you have a small sales team and very few layers of management between the library and our board.
Yeah, a lot of synergies there actually with what you just said there, Andrea, because we're quite similar in the sense that we're a fairly small organisation, and as I said, we do have a board of directors, 2 brothers who are both sat in the audience as well, along with our head of publishing, and that allows us to make, as you said with your experiences, allows us to make decisions very quickly. We've also got a very low staff turnover, which allows us to build up a really good rapport with our institutional customers, and any kind of feedback that we receive from those institutional customers, we're able to shoehorn those into our schedules and overall strategies. And in terms of the content that we publish and the content that we've got coming through our pipeline, whilst we do have, I think we have about a 2-year kind of strategy at a time, but it also allows us, if there's any kind of new opportunities, any kind of curveballs that are thrown our way, we're able to react really well to that and able to work so much better as a cohesive team, whether that's sales, marketing, content, editorial, or indeed at board level as well. So a lot of synergies there from our perspective too.
So again, lots of synergies. So the Royal Society is a not-for-profit as well. We're a mission-led society publisher, and the mission is to disseminate the research to as many people as possible. Any surplus that the publishing team make goes back into the work that the Royal Society does, whether that be grant giving, policy making, education, or the publishing side as well. So any surplus we make goes back into the work that we do. We're also a strong advocate for open science. We're in the middle of a transition to greater open access. We're looking to make it to full open access in the coming years. We've also got an open access equity scheme. Here, equity talked about quite a lot. And we have over 100 countries that have free access and free publishing. And we also offer discretionary waivers to researchers who may not have funds to publish as well. And that's all through the work we do, and that helps the community in publishing in the open access journals.
Thank you so much. And for our next question, we're going to mix it up and we're going to have Graham start with this one. But how is your organization currently incorporating AI into your work? And what is your organization's vision for using it in the future?
It's a really interesting topic, and we've heard it discussed a couple of times already this week. I'd say for the Royal Society, it's something that we are getting to grips with AI. We already use it in some of the processes we have in terms of making some of the publishing time shorter. It's also helping us with our research integrity, which we'll come on to later. But in the peer review process, the reviewers don't use AI, and they're instructed not to use AI in the actual review itself. So I think we see it as really helping us in terms of discoverability, with accessibility, and also with our search and tool functions as well. So the platform that we use, Atapon, is using AI to help with taxonomy as well. And again, that should help with discoverability. I think we're trying to come up with some good use cases for AI where it can be helpful in the whole process, and we're going to be doing more on that in the coming weeks and months, I'm sure, and letting people know where AI is featured in the whole process.
Yeah, for us, AI is a really interesting subject. I would probably say over the last 6 to 12 months, we've used our academic liaison manager to do a lot of research into this, to find out not just about how we can use AI ourselves, but also to get a really good grasp of the how well AI is being received by librarians and our institutional customers. So yes, we are using machine learning, but it's very much kind of behind the scenes rather than generative AI or things like that. So we use machine learning to further enrich our metadata, especially our OCR derived metadata as well, to further enrich the search experience and discoverability. So that's very much used by our content and editorial teams, and that's something that's currently in development. But we're quite excited by it, and it should further boost the quality and the accessibility of our products, whether they be existing or new. But as I said before at the start, we are keenly aware of the debate that is raging on within amongst universities in particular, and the way that we are creating, for example, an AI statement. We hope to have that up on the website soon, and from which we can use that to derive an actual AI policy, where I suppose if there was going to be one takeaway from that, our message is clear, particularly to the end users and students, is that, you guys, you need to do the work. We'll be there to help you and aid you in what you need to do, but we're not going to give you the answers, kind of thing. So, that's... be interesting to see how that develops, but it's very much something that we're keenly aware of, definitely.
We've been doing some experimentation we've become open, but even though a review journal is open or an article, they're very long, very dense articles that were written by scientists, usually for scientists. So we've been looking at AI and how can we make our articles more accessible to policymakers or to the general public who have an interest in science. So we used, it's Notebook LM. I always say LM Notebook, but Notebook LM is the most recent thing we've tried, where you put your content in, and the output was a podcast with 2 AI. They sound like people talking. I don't know. I can get the link to people if they're interested. And the authors approved it. So we did this first, and then we had the authors listen to it to make sure that it was giving what they were saying in the way they wanted it said. So that was the first thing we've tried. And we are trying some things with visual as well as shorter summaries and things like that. That we haven't done, we haven't finished those experiments, but the Notebook LM is the one we've done the most with so far.
That's a fascinating example. I thank you all for being sort of very explicit about what you're experimenting with and where in your processes and how and labeling it. I think one of the themes that I've already begun to hear this week is that we need more granularity around these contexts or around the discussions of AI. So I appreciate all 3 of you being very clear about how you're using it. Up next, our question is on how your organization supports movement towards open access. What models of open access have you tried, and what works and doesn't work for you and for your organization? Do you want to start with this?
Well, as I said at the beginning, we do review articles that are invited. So when we first started looking at open access, reviews were not under any mandates. So it was strictly for our mission. That has changed after we made decisions to go open. So we were glad we were on top of that. But the traditional models, the APC, the read and publish really didn't work for us because you can't invite someone to write an article and then hand them a bill. And the bill would be very high because, as I said, they're very long articles. So there's not as many. So we started looking at new models. We worked with Rain Crow, and we were the first publisher to implement Subscribe to Open. And we did a pilot of 5 journals, and then we added 3 more, and we had a total of 8 for 3 years. And then we saw what usage looked like. We really examined where the usage was coming from because, again, we're mission driven, and we were seeing our usage coming from small mental health clinics to police departments to education departments, people who would never have the money or have the means to purchase a subscription. So we felt that we were doing the right thing with Subscribe to Open, and we decided to move all 51 of our journals to that model. And we're going into our second year, and we've been successful in the first year, and all the indication is we'll be successful again for 2025. The other thing we did is myself, Richard Gallagher, who's our president, and Rain Crow, we developed the Subscribe to Open community of practice. And that started with about 15 publishers, librarians, and a funder and a subscription agent. And that's grown to over 250 people on the invitation list. Usually about 80 people at least join our monthly meetings. But really, it's been a movement where we've all worked together to make sure the model works, and that we're talking about it. There's been some variations that have come up, and we have to address that. But so it's the model itself and then the community surrounding it.
So this is probably a question that's perhaps less relevant to us. We're small and independent, but we are a commercial publisher with paywalled content. That all being said, however, we are working towards creating an OA resource. We still have a lot of we still have a long road to go in terms of our brand building, and particularly for those that are new to British Online Archives, the idea is to actually create an OA primary resource that can give people, whether that be academics, librarians, students, an initial impression of what British Online Archives is and how it's structured by looking at an OA resource. So that's something that we're working on to try and cater to that side of things, really.
So for open access, our main model is read and publish, although we do have publish and read for Max Planck in Germany, because they have quite a fairly consistent level of output. But for the rest of the world, it is around read and publish, and we've had that in place now for 4 years. They're meant to be transformative agreements, they're meant to be transitional, but we've been working with read and publish as it is, just so we can get some more data, some more history, some more practice with it. And it may change, it may develop as we go forward, but we've seen that we've been able to grow our output to 2/3 open access by the end of 2023 through our read and publish deals. We have around 400 in place. We're very close to having some news for something in South America as well. That will come probably towards the end of the year. But we're looking to grow the existing members we have in different territories, but also break ground in new territories as well. So we have, like I say, 400, but they're from North America, from Europe, but also some other territories as well. But yeah, I think that the idea with transformative agreements is that they were meant to be a transitional model. So we'll see how they evolve over time.
Thank you. Okay, for our next question, how is your organization fostering research integrity in the publishing process? Do you want to take a start at this one?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I suppose a lot of that kind of goes back to particularly what's been discussed quite a bit at the conferences in terms of AI. As I said before, we are developing an AI statement and a broader policy, really, which clearly outlines not just how British Online Archives is using AI, but also to make it clear as to what our stance is in terms of how that should be used and how the end user can take advantage of that in an ethical and responsible way. But I think beyond that as well, there are other things to help enhance that. So we've just piloted, for example, our first teaching pack. So we're trying to bring British Online Archives more into the classroom, and by using specific case studies from some of our content. One particular, the one that we're piloting is our brand new collection, Pandemic Society and Public Health, 1517 to 1925, to try and engage students more within a classroom environment, rather than them going off on their own within the library and trying to do the research for themselves, but just to kind of give that extra helping hand, but also to help out teachers really, and to allow them to make sense of what are quite very large resources and being able to start from somewhere, I suppose, really. So, yeah.
So clearly, rigor and quality are important, especially to the Royal Society. You want to make sure that we have the best research articles and review articles that we can have. We're working with a lot of data and image specialists to make sure that the team and the editorial team and the reviewers are aware of what they need to do to check the data and the images when they come through. We're also doing a lot of training with the board members and the reviewers to make sure that they're aware for what to look out for. In terms of, I suppose, tools that we're looking at around research integrity, we'll be working with the STM's Integrity Hub as well going forward. We've also recently signed an agreement with Data SEER to help us with our data compliance as well. So we're, again, trying to use some of these extra tools, extra third parties to help us with our research integrity.
Said we only do review articles, and so we don't have the primary research. But I think one of the roles of a review article is part of the integrity process. And there was an article from the National Academies called Reproducibility and Replicability in Science. And one of the quotes was, some would argue that focusing on replication of a single study as a way to improve the efficiency of science is ill-placed. Rather, reviews of cumulative evidence on a subject gave both the overall effect, size, and generalizability may be more useful. And I think when the annual reviews was started, one of the issues was there was so much research out there. What is the good research? And this was in 1932. So I think the part of the review's role in this is to look at the reproducibility.
I have a quick question. Yeah, could you please hold on for the mic? We've got a volunteer for the microphone. Thank you. And actually, while we're waiting for that, I will flip forward to the reminders for the audience questions. We do have a mic going around for questions, so we'll be sure to use that. And feel free to, or please do introduce yourself before you ask your question. Thank you.
I'm Jackie. I work at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory Press. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on the tools that you were saying that you were using, the third-party research, the third-party tools, it seemed like, to confirm and validate research integrity. What kind of processes or systems do these tools use? Is it AI-driven? Is it manpower-driven? How do these things work, if you have more of an idea on it? Thank you.
I think that was specifically for me, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Please feel free to answer all of you, but
yeah, it's not something that I myself, being in the more sales orientated, that I really know that much about. But what I can say is, it's, like I said, it's something that's been created, as a kind of like a backroom kind of tool, really, as opposed to something that that's liable to be manipulated, for example, by the end user. So yeah, I mean, as that develops, we'll be able to solidify that, really, in terms of our approach to ensure that continues to happen, really. But yeah, I mean, we can talk about it more afterwards, really. But yeah, be able to get some more information about that for you. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I would just add that I think a lot of the tools are still relatively new to market and being piloted and being tested at the moment. I mentioned that we've signed up with Data SEER about data compliance. That's relatively new to us as well. So again, we'll we'll do some more work with it, and maybe next year or next time we can update more on how they're going. There's another one as well that we've recently piloted, which is Signal as well, and that helps in the whole research integrity process.
All right. And so now we are going to open up to audience questions. And as I said, we do have a volunteer with a microphone. So if you would be willing to raise your hand, we can have the microphone brought to you.
I was just wondering how all of you are, because you're nimble and also mission driven, how are you integrating greater accessibility into your processes these days?
For asking that.
For us, a lot of it is through our platform, which we use in Genta, and we have the VPAT, and we follow all the guidelines. And when new guidelines come out, we rely on our platform provider to help us with that.
Yeah, so we have an accessibility statement, which is also accompanied with a VPAT, which clearly shows where we're at in terms of our journey, in terms of accessibility. It's a never-ending journey. It's something that we're continuing to do, but yeah, it's definitely something that's we know that within the as far as our institutional customers are concerned, this is becoming, certainly within the last few years, it's becoming increasingly more important, and that's something that we're definitely responding to.
From Royal Society, there's a few recent things that we've been looking at to do with accessibility. I think one thing we've done is a small change for us, is we changed from it being 2 columns to 1 column on the journal, so that's easier for reading in e-readers. We're also looking at perhaps using AI to generate alternative text for all images, so there's that can be read on the e-reader as well. We're also looking at including plain language summaries, again, to help with accessibility, where maybe English may not be the first language as well. I think we're hoping that most of the research articles would have that. That may be helped by AI, but then a human check at the end. So there are different things we're looking at to increase our accessibility.
I'd be really interested to hear on the panel's views of how usage is going to change in our attitude towards reporting our usage, particularly as open access, in theory, should enable so many more parts of the world to view our content. We have, I think, for the past 4 years, so I'm talking Biochemical Society here, we've been so fixated on looking at published data, who's publishing from where, how we track that data. I believe, talking to librarians, that that's really a focus for a lot of librarians, but particularly for Subscribe to Open. So I'd be very interested in Andrea's view of this. Surely we should be tracking, monitoring where that usage is happening, how we convince libraries that their dollars are paying for this research to get to more and more people. So I'd just be really interested to hear what the panel's views are on how they explore what that dissemination looks like in an open access world.
Sure. We use, it was Liblinks. I think it's now, I don't know if Tim's in the room, Touchstone, but we take our non-known usage data and we match it up with IP so we can see where our usage is coming from. So if someone wanted to say what type of institutions, we're trying not to give out the name for privacy issues, but we can tell them what type of institutions. For those libraries that cared that their subscription dollars, they want to know what the impact is, we can tell them that. I think on the other side of the coin is the institutional usage. If they don't have to go through the VPN or they don't have to do single sign-on to get access, and we see usage go down at the institution, and then they start looking at cost per download, I think that's a question back to libraries. How are you considering open access usage? And usage you might see go down. We thought we could do more regional usage and say, well, in your city, it's gone up. We could show country, but that's about as granular as you can get with IP addresses. So I think we have the concern on one side about usage maybe going down at the institutional if you're counting, well, it's probably going up, but then being able to provide them where this usage is coming from. And I believe, and this is where there's the global reports that are part of the counter. I don't know if someone here who can talk a little bit. We don't have that implemented now. It's our plan where a library can see, oh, there you are. A library can see the go in and see where the usage is globally.
Hey, I'm Michelle Erberg. I also work for LibLinks and I manage the stats that Andrea's talking about. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about how that works for open access matching or just generally open content and IP matching and things. But the global report that she's referring to will aggregate just usage around the world when we can't actually identify an institution. So it's a count of views, but it doesn't disambiguate, like this view came from Norway or this view came from the United States. But it is an aggregate count, so you get an idea of how much value add you get from institutional matching versus the unknown quantity, which is not matched. So you still get a good sense of like who's actually using your content. Like, oh, there's a lot of usage out there. We just need to work on, matching it better. So thanks.
Yeah, again, we're not open access, but we do use LibLinks, Michelle, in terms of our own usage, which we're currently Counter 5 compliant, soon to be Counter 5.1, I think, Michelle. So yeah, very obviously usage is very important for us. It's very you're able to divide by a collection that's been accessed by the particular institution. So yeah, I mean, it's really important from our perspective.
Quickly to add from Royal Society, because we're still read and publish, we're very much looking at customer usage data, which we do through the platform. We also get some data from ResearchGate as well, and they can show us other data at a country level rather than maybe an institutional level. We'll get some data from them as well. But I think it's an important question and something we'll probably all need to grapple with going forward.
And I may just add a little bit more context from the librarian perspective of when we look at this usage data. We've looked at for more context than just numbers forever, even prior to thinking of all these options and different ways in which we're assessing the kinds of journal collections we bring into our library. And so at least from my library perspective, we've never done just sort of every single possible journal, looking at it, because there's always going to be disciplinary context. There's going to be platform changes that might have produced a glitch. We might have forgotten to put something in our discovery system. And so I think, particularly thinking about your comment about just being worried about librarians seeing the cost per use go up as the downloads go down. At least I hope in my group, we're using more analysis than just that. And I hope the case is true for the rest of the librarian community because these models are different and they are changing the way we look at our usage data. While we think of a few more questions for the audience, I do have one that, actually we have one right here. Sorry, go right ahead.
Thanks. What's the biggest obstacle for your organizations in open access if you look to the future, sort of medium-term future? What would help you solve that problem? Where are the real roadblocks with how the next 5 years maybe go forward?
It's subscribed to open. And I think, there's questions about, what happens in 4 years if budgets get cut and they say, oh, well, we can have access anyway. Then those journals have to become closed. So I think that hasn't happened to us yet. We don't see it next year, but I think that would be a roadblock. So we're always looking, are there other options? But, we hope we're pushing to keep that sustainable through the community of practice. But I would say that's something that we look at.
And I think from our point of view, because we are working globally as well, different markets are at very different stages of open access and read and publish and transformative agreement. So something that might work in the US context may not work somewhere else and vice versa. So we're trying to, I suppose, find something that will work with most people because we're only a small team, small publishing. So I think that's our challenge, is trying to find something that's fair and equitable for the greater number of people, and then seeing if that model would then work for different markets we work in.
I'll just add to that really quickly. I mentioned earlier about the open access resource that we're trying to work on in order to particularly introduce new customers to British Online Archives. I wouldn't so much call it an obstacle, but a consideration obviously for us is making sure that the project is commercially viable. So even though it's a free resource, we need to make sure that it's something that's going to end up, being commercially viable later on down the road. So, yeah.
Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question right now about particularly around subscribe to open. I'm curious as how you're talking to authors and researchers about the annual review's move to subscribe to open, and if those conversations look different than the conversation you'd have with this community right here.
For reviews, because there's not funding behind a review article, they're not asking us in the way that someone doing primary research will say, well, I have a grant and I have to pay to have this open. So we don't have those conversations. But we have, so each editorial committee, we talk to all the editors, we talk to the authors. But I brought this up in our community of practice meeting, is I don't think we're doing, not just end reviews, but in general, I don't think we're doing as great a job communicating what the model is to the researchers, but they're also inundated with all these different models. I had a conversation with the consortium manager when I was at the book fair, and they said they don't understand it. They don't understand subscribe to open. Their article is open. They don't know how. They don't care. But I think it's important we let them know how, and that it's their subscription dollars. So it's something that's on our radar that we need to get better about doing.
Well, Dave, I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question then. So many libraries, like my own, have strategic initiatives to increase the presence of historically underrepresented voices in our collections. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how your organization can help us meet those goals.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we're really keenly aware of. So obviously, I mentioned right at the start that because of Britain's historical relationship with the world, we have a lot of records which look at that, colonial and missionary records, for example, which stretch the length and breadth of what was the British Empire. So what we have tried to do, particularly within our content and editorial teams, we've been writing articles called Amplifying Voices. So it's looking at those kind of untold stories within colonial and missionary-based records. To give an example of that, there was Mary Wills, our content supervisor, who's doing a great job with this, focused one of her essays on Philip Quakey, who was the first African ordained bishop by the Church of England. So these are some of the stories that, we only started doing that probably about a year ago. So these stories will be able, and they'll be free to view as well on our website. I should say that, just to kind of tell those stories that haven't really been told, but and now we are turning our attention to make sure that happens. So there'll be more of these kind of amplified voices essays that will happen over the course of time.
All right. Well, with that, then, I think I would like to thank everyone for spending some time with us this afternoon for discussing how these niche publishers and organizations are innovative in their field. And so we wish everyone a wonderful rest of your conference. And thank you again.